Hi, Science 10s. This is lesson 3 from biology. So in your notes, it's B3, cell membranes. So last lesson we would have discussed that the cell membrane we've considered to be an organelle of the cell. So both plant cells and animal cells have it. And the way we kind of described it is it's a protective barrier for the cell, and it allows materials in and out based on what the cell needs, as well as what the cell is producing. So we'll talk about a little bit about the structure of the cell membrane and how it moves things in and out. That's one of the big topics that I want to get through in biology. So B3, B4 are kind of the big things that you need to understand. Out of Science 10, we'll talk about different types of movement across the membrane, and then we'll try to talk a little bit about what's going on within plants, as some of you guys are taking Bio 20, and just having an idea of the structure of a leaf will give us a little bit of help into Bio 20. So in the notes here, so it says it's important to maintain the balance, or a word that we'll use, equilibrium inside of the cell. So that means keeping things in balance, whether it's the amount of water, whether it's the pH. You could also talk about temperature and those sorts of things. But you want to maintain equilibrium within a cell, but also within our bodies, right? We want bodies to stay relatively the same so that every process is working at its optimal amount. So it says, recall the cell membrane maintains this balance by regulating the substances that go in and out. Oops, ing. So regulating what goes into or out of a cell. So not everything can get into and out of a cell. It's kind of like a bouncer at a club or something. Not that you guys go to clubs, but it's the doorman at something that's saying you can go in, you cannot go in. So what a cell membrane is made up of. So composition, cell membranes are made up of what we'll call a bilayer. So bi meaning two layers of phospholipids. So again, phospho, just to kind of break it down into Latin terms, so that means contains phosphorus, and the word lipid actually means, I guess, means fat. So each phospholipid molecule contains a head and a tail. So that usually you'll see it kind of represented this way. So the head here, so this is the head part, and then the tail, you'll see it has kind of two legs of it. Um, so the head is actually, it's called hydrophilic. And a tail is hydrophobic. So phobic, you've probably heard, right? Phobia, being afraid of something. So hydrophobic technically means water fearing, or it doesn't like water. Hydrophilic means water loving. So philic, phile, Phile, both mean loving. So that one, pedophile. So phile, philic means loving. Ped actually indicates children or young. So pedophile is child loving. Not the best, but again, a lot of these words come from Latin derivations, so breaking them into the smaller portions. So the phospholipid bilayer. So again, I said it's a bilayer, meaning it's a double layer. And so that head and those little tails, what they actually do is the tails point to the other tails of the other part of the layer, the other layer. So what we see is, so this is the phospholipid bilayer. So you have water outside, and you have water inside the cytoplasm. Um, so there's water on both outsides. So again, this head part is hydrophilic. It's fine with water. That region in between, so where those tails are, they're actually made up of a fatty acid chain. That's the hydrophobic part. So it's not super happy with water inside. And again, yeah, so the water is against all of this and against all of this, but there's not really any water on that inside portion of the membrane. This is the membrane, this is the outer part. So there is, again, within a cell, there's that phospholipid bilayer all around. So inside the cell, the cytoplasm is made up of water mostly. So that hydrophilic side is okay with that. So proteins may be attached to or suspended within these phospholipids. So within this, there tends to be proteins, surface and subsurface proteins within that. And proteins are important because of a couple different reasons. So first one is cell-to-cell communication. So cells can identify other cells and what their function is, or if they are foreign bodies or anything like that. And the other important reason for proteins is actually transport of substances across the membrane. Um, Substances across the membrane. So some proteins may have marker molecules that help them recognize each other. So this is what I was talking about. So that prevents anything foreign from getting into the cell. So within our bodies, this is our immune response. So if a white blood cell recognizes something that is not a part of the body, so it has different proteins on the surface of the cells, so those are called antigens. A white blood cell can recognize that and start an immune response if it recognizes that something is a foreign substance to the body or a foreign cell. And so your body is recognizing bacteria and viruses and fighting them off as they go. Um, it actually is also a problem in allergies. Your body is actually identifying something that's harmless within the body as being something foreign, and your body will mount a immune response against something like that. So on to the next page. Some more diagrams. Looks a little nicer in color. So the cell membrane model is often referred to as the fluid mosaic model. So what that represents, am I going to be able to write here? Let's try it. So the molecules, so these phospholipids making up the membrane, are in constant motion. Giving the membrane flexibility to change shape. So again, it can move around. Cells can kind of change their shape as they, if we're talking about cells moving through the body, so as they move through different capillaries and that sort of thing. Overall, the cell membrane is considered to be semi-permeable. So permeable is talking about the ability to let things in and out, right? If I have my strainer that I use for like pasta and something like that, if I put tiny little pebbles in it, they can fall through the holes of my colander. If I put the dryer balls that are sitting next to me on my table right now in that strainer, they can't get out. So it's selectively permeable in that it lets certain things in and out, but not necessarily everything. So it only allows some materials to cross the membrane while excluding others. And so how does it decide what to let in? One thing that I've talked about already, so two factors, is particle size. Um, so if something's really big, it can't easily get through. So small molecules can get through. While others cannot. So small molecules, something like water, is a pretty small molecule. Others cannot, let's even say glucose, pretty big molecule. So it has a tough time getting in, but we know that sugar does need to get in. So um, ways that it can figure out to get through, so determining factor on what the membrane lets through is something called membrane proteins. So we already said there are proteins embedded within that phospholipid bilayer. So we see in this diagram here, so there's a protein channel that allows things in, different protein molecules, marker things. So protein channels are the big thing that I'm talking about here. So membrane proteins, um, they can bind to specific molecules. Uh, and transport them in the cell. In a variety of ways. So there's a diagram below there. Again, we don't have the blue textbook, so don't worry too much about that, but you should be able to identify. Did I put it in here? Oh, I did. Just a couple things that are important with this diagram. We probably won't go through all of it, but this one, I know it's probably hard to see on yours, depending on how good your printer is. So this is the phospholipid bilayer. Again, made up of those hydrophobic and hydrophilic regions. Um, Basically everything else in this diagram, like if you went to page 293, it's straight from that. So we don't really need to worry too much about it, but we have just those membrane proteins, so something like this. This is a channel protein. It's sometimes called an integral protein because it kind of integrates between the two layers. So things can flow through that little channel. This is probably a carbohydrate chain, so something that's identifying the type of cell that there is. Yeah, I'm not going to worry too much about these sorts of diagrams. There's cytoskeletal filaments within this. Not a big deal, but know that there's a phospholipid bilayer, and within it there's a whole bunch of proteins embedded that have many different functions. So the next lesson is going to be the biggie. B4 is Usually I split it even into 2 classes depending because there's so much happening in B4. So peek at that one next and we will chat with you later. Bye guys.